So I spent a month in Japan, and here's what happened. As my first travel abroad experience, I didn't expect much. Just making the jump across the vast Pacific Ocean and stepping foot on foreign soil was a success in itself. I went to experience the culture, see beautiful architecture, and learn Japanese. November was a good time for me to go because I knew I'd be able to see the fall colors and the weather would be mild. My online art tutoring was picking up, so I knew I'd be able to make some money while I was away. I did not make a full-time income, but tutoring the occasional student in the early mornings helped settle my money-anxious mind. The other thing that made this trip affordable for me was workaway. If you're not familiar with workaway, I talk about it more in another video, but basically, it's work in exchange for room and board. You can stay with hosts from all over the world. I had the wonderful opportunity to stay with a Japanese-American family in Omihachiman, Shiga, Japan. For the most part, I stayed with my host family during the weekdays and traveled around Kyoto on the weekends. On my first weekend out, I walked along the Philosopher's Path. The Philosopher's Path is a series of Buddhist temples and Shinto shrines in eastern Kyoto, all within walking distance of each other. There are literally thousands of temples and shrines in Kyoto, but the Philosopher's Path has some of the bigger, more well-known ones. Visiting temples and shrines was one of the main reasons for visiting Japan, so I knew I had to go. The path can be walked from north to south or south to north. I started in the south at Nanzenji Temple and made my way up, stopping at Kumano Shrine, Otoyo Jinja Shrine, Honen-in Temple, and finally Jinkakuji Temple. I didn't get a whole lot of footage that day because I wanted it to be a meditative walk and to start to familiarize myself with walking around Japan on my own. At Nanzenji Temple, I was greeted by a volunteer tour guide who recognized me as a tourist and offered to walk me around and teach me about the history of the temple. She was an older Japanese lady, and sometimes her English was a little difficult to understand, but I was just glad to have someone to walk with on my first day out. At the end of the walk, I stumbled upon a tourist trap type shopping street and bought some little gifts for my friends and family. My brother had jokingly asked me to bring him back a sword, so when I saw the samurai sword umbrellas, I knew I had to buy one. The first 2 weekends, I stayed at Guesthouse Engawa and traveled around Kyoto. Guesthouse Engawa is definitely a place I'd recommend for solo female travelers looking for an affordable place to stay in Kyoto. There's strong Wi-Fi, the bed has a curtain for privacy, not quite a capsule hotel, but similar. The room had a heater, air conditioner, a personal trash can, mirror, tissue box, earplugs, and a power adapter with USB outlets. When I arrived, the owner was very kind and spoke to me in English. He even offered me a handful of professional photos he had taken around Kyoto. I gave these away as gifts to friends and family. My only complaint was the bed was a little too hard for me as an American, but that seems to be a common thing for futons and beds to be on the more firm side in Japan. When booking a guest house or hotel in Japan, I recommend booking at least 2 to 3 weeks in advance. I was fortunate enough to visit Japan soon after it had reopened its borders on October 11th, so there wasn't nearly as many tourists as there would be during a normal year. In November, sunset is around 5 p.m., so oftentimes I would be walking back to my guest house after dark. The streets are safe in Japan, be smart and aware of your surroundings, but there's still lots of foot traffic in central Kyoto well into the evening. One night I even made friends with a little black alley cat. It's Gigi! I almost decided not to go to Fushimi Inari Taisha Shrine, because I thought it might be an overrated touristy spot, but it's not. Definitely recommend. My only regret is I didn't give myself enough time to fully explore the grounds. Fushimi Inari is known for its thousands of torii gates. Torii gates symbolize passing from the mundane world to a pure, spiritual one. You could spend just an hour or two there if you want to check it off your list, or you could spend most of the day there exploring the extensive bamboo grove behind the shrine. I took a trail off the beaten path and was delighted to find a bamboo forest that passed by a cluster of mini shrines. While walking through the shrine cluster, I noticed a Japanese man going from shrine to shrine and praying briefly at each one. I found a quiet little spot at the end of the trail, so I'm all alone here. And there's many little mini shrines with the dual kitsune foxes and the Inari Tori shrines. I'm at the Inari gates, where there's thousands of, well, at least 1,000 of these red Inari gates all around. And I found a little shrine here, just out of the way, so I'm not bothering anybody. And I'm going to show you how they pray. So, here you go. Bow twice. Clap twice. And bow once. And that's it. I did wander a little too far and kind of got myself lost that day, which wouldn't have been so bad, but I was running out of daylight, and what was worse, my phone was nearly out of battery. My phone was my lifeline in Japan. I normally carried an extra battery pack, but I didn't bring it that time because of the unexpected friend I had made on Sunday morning, so I hadn't been back to my guest house to pick up my battery pack. I made it home safely, but that was definitely one of those times when a travel buddy would have made things much easier. On the second weekend, I visited the Imperial Palace. The Imperial Palace is free to enter, you just have to pass through a temperature check. When you look at Kyoto's Imperial Palace on Google Maps, it shows rotating drone footage of the extensive grounds. Really, it's huge. There are many places to picnic around here, and lots of cute dogs out on walks. A couple of the dogs I saw were too cute to pass up without getting a photo, so I asked their owners, "Sashin mo ii desu ka?" And they'd say something like, "Inu, hi, dozo." Inside the main temple complex, there are brochures in English, Japanese, and Chinese. Google Translate does a pretty good job of translating signage, so if you're curious about the history of the place, you can use that as well. I especially liked the pond area near the end of the route because I was lucky enough to see a couple cranes posing elegantly for pictures. The next day was Sunday, so I went to Nihon Nazarene Church again and met up with my new friend Caroline. We spent that rainy Sunday at Arashiyama Bamboo Forest. This was one of my favorite places to visit because I had it as my desktop background for years, so it was so cool to finally walk through the bamboo for real. The bamboo grove is free to enter, and you may even see girls in kimono and guys in yukata walking through. Caroline also wanted to visit the Tenryuji garden and see the fall colors. It's 500 yen for the garden, and I'm glad we went because I got some good footage in there. It's likely even more beautiful in the springtime. On the third weekend, I chose to stay with my host family, and after our original plans got cancelled due to a bus schedule mix-up, we went to Hikone Castle. Host mom had tickets for this one, so it was free for me, but the usual entrance fee is 1,200 yen for the castle, garden, and museum. Hikone Castle is a 3-story building surrounded by 2 moats and a high rock wall. These defenses are part of the reason why it still stands today after 400 years. Hikone Castle is one of 12 Japanese castles that still retains its original keep, and one of only 5 Japanese castle keeps designated as national treasures. On our way out, we passed by a man doing a monkey show. I love these little unplanned adventures. Just highlights here. You can find the longer version in another video. Another thing I'll talk about in this section is Biennale art. Biennale is a biennial art festival held in Omihachiman and Hikone. My host mom had tickets to go in, so I got to see all this amazing art for free. The exhibits were displayed in traditional Japanese homes throughout the city. Most often, slippers were provided to allow you to walk on the tatami mat flooring, but sometimes we just took off our shoes and walked around in our socks. Again, just the highlights here. If you'd like to see my full video on Biennale art, you can find the link in the description below. On my 4th and final weekend in Japan, I went to Enryakuji Temple. This large temple complex sits atop Mount Hiei in northeastern Kyoto. Enryakuji Temple is the birthplace of the Tendai sect, which was started by the Buddhist monk Sagano in the 9th century. I chose to take the Sakamoto cable car up the mountain, but you can also take a bus. I definitely recommend the cable car though, because it's a fun ride up and they play Ghibli music on the inside. There are many scenic temple areas throughout Enryakuji. On the hike from the cable car to the temple entrance, I heard a rhythmic gong sound that reverberated over the grounds. When I reached the temple area, I saw that it was a bell that visitors were allowed to ring once during their visit. On my way back down the mountain, I made it back to the cable car with only a minute to spare. I rushed inside to buy my return ticket because I thought I was going back down the mountain a different way. I should have just bought a round-trip ticket. In my rush, I clicked child instead of adult ticket, and the conductor did a return and got me an adult ticket in record time. It was so embarrassing to make such a silly mistake, and I was grateful to the conductor man because he helped me board on time and saved me a 30-minute wait. I love visiting zoos and seeing animals, so on my last Saturday in Japan, I went to the Iwatayama Monkey Park in Arashiyama, Kyoto. It was one of the highlights of my visit. It's 600 yen to enter and a 20-minute hike up the mountain, but it's totally worth it to see the semi-wild Japanese macaw monkeys at the top. The monkeys are free to roam around, and while you're not allowed to pet them, you can purchase 100 yen bags of food to feed them in a designated area. I swear, the monkey in the shot wanted me to film him. He shook the tree to get my attention and then walked right past the camera. I've got lots of monkey footage, too much for this video, so I've included just the highlights here, but I made a separate video if you can't get enough of the Japanese macaws. To relax at the end of the day, I chose to go to Sagano Onsen Tenzen no Yu. If I was going to visit Japan, I was going to experience an onsen. I picked this one because it had an open-air, rock-surrounded hot spring, and because it was within walking distance of the monkey park that I had visited earlier that day. Japanese onsen are public baths that draw from hot springs or simply have a hot bath for people to share. Men and women have separate areas, and yes, people strip down to nothing. I had done my research before, so I knew that you're expected to be completely naked. You may carry a small towel for modesty as you walk inside or move to a different area, but the towel goes on your head when you're sitting in the bath. Before you enter the hot springs, you're expected to rinse your body in the showers at the onsen. Hair should be tied up, and you should never submerge your head in the onsen, as hair is seen as dirty. Another thing to be aware of is that tattoos in Japan are strongly associated with the Yakuza crime syndicate. So if you have large tattoos, you may want to find an onsen that is accepting of that. Sagano Onsen is not. If you have small tattoos, they can be covered with a band-aid. I had a wonderful time at Sagano Onsen. An elderly lady talked with me in English in the dressing room and asked me where I was from and if I had been to an onsen before. And then when I went inside, I saw that there were two main areas. An inside bath area with hot sauna-like air, not for me, and an open air bath where I spent my time. The open air bath had 5 different sections. The main public bath, where most people sat and relaxed. 4 shallow bed-style baths where you could rest your head on stone pillows. A couple of smaller private baths for individuals. A raised resting area for you to lie down and cool off. And the golden bath, which had a golden brown color to it because of the iron and natural minerals in the water. There was also a waterfall and a shimenawa hung over the golden bath. Shimenawa are sacred ropes that are tied over or around something to show its sanctity or purity. You could easily spend half a day at the onsen. There were little reading nooks at the front, a little foot bath with those fish that eat dead skin cells off your feet, and a restaurant area with reasonably priced food, so I sat and ate there after I'd spent an hour or two in the bath area. So you may have heard of cat cafes. They started in Japan and are now in America too. I had the pleasure of going to one in Kansas City, Missouri. But have you heard of an owl cafe? There's a place in central Kyoto that has both a Bengal cat room and an owl forest. The entrance fee was 700 yen for the owls. I opted to save my money and skip the Bengal cat room because it was my last weekend in Japan and I knew there were 2 kitty cats waiting for me when I got back home. They had a whole variety of owls inside, but it was a very small room, so I walked the little loop twice and got lots of footage. That's all I have for this video. Check out my other content here if you'd like to see more of the banale art, the Japanese macaws, or want to know more about my personal experience. Mata ne!